welcome back to Weed Wednesdays. Today's episode is going to be about Volunteer Canola. Now, Volunteer Canola used to be the 20th most abundant weed species on the Manitoba weed surveys. Now, it's number 3. Now, that's due in part to harvest losses and seed dormancy, but also the general increase in prevalence of canola acres across Manitoba. Now, canola in general is also a fairly competitive plant, so when it establishes itself in a field, it actually competes for resources quite well. We'll talk a little bit about control. When we're talking about control with herbicides, it completely depends on what resistance trait you're dealing with. We typically see Liberty here in the Red River Valley. Market share is well over 90%. There are still some guys out there that grow Roundup Ready and Clearfield canola. Most growers seem to be gravitating away from the Roundup Ready canola just because if they're mixing in the corn or the soybeans, you don't want too many Roundup Ready crops. Clearfield canola, we see some guys chasing premium once in a while. Unfortunately, group 2 herbicides have an Achilles heel, and that is that there is a lot of resistance out there. So because canola is so relatively competitive and soybeans, for example, are not, the action threshold for controlling Volunteer canola and soybeans is actually really low. You can see really substantial yield losses if you let it get out of hand. So regardless of your seeded crop, there are plenty of options pre-seed and in crop for controlling Volunteer canola. Really, the only important thing to keep note of is which resistance trait you're dealing with. So that being said, if you haven't had canola in rotation for a few years on a field, it's time to talk to the neighbors and see what they've been growing. That's really the most important factor when you're choosing your product. There are endless products, endless tank mixes, multiple active ingredients. It's not the hardest thing in the world to control. So post canola harvest, when we're dealing with our harvest losses, it is best to keep them on or as close to the soil surface as humanly possible. The more seed to soil contact you have, the shallower they are. The earlier in the fall you get into work or harrow, the more canola is going to germinate and emerge compared to, say, later fall tillage. So the goal here is winter kill. You want to disturb that soil surface, get as much of that seed germinating as possible, and then it'll die off over the winter. So now that the basics are out of the way, we can actually dive into a little bit of data and start to put 2 and 2 together. This right here is a graph of average canola yields in the Red River Valley over the last 10 years. Something we've noticed is that when you compare the first half of May to the second half of May in terms of seeding dates, that there's actually a substantial and significant difference. It's about 15% or 6 bushels. So now we can couple this data with our scouting experience and start connecting the dots. We've noticed that flea beetles are typically emerged early in May before most canola gets seeded. So what happens is the Volunteer canola that's already in the ground pops up first. The flea beetles flock to areas of higher concentrations. Now, if you're, say, seeding some canola into a field that has lots of Volunteer canola, what would you think would happen? Well, the flea beetles will emerge early before you've seeded. They'll start feeding on the Volunteer canola. And of course, you seed your field and all of a sudden your crop is up. So now the flea beetles have this all-you-can-eat buffet and they don't need to go anywhere else. So we'll couple that with the cooler temperatures in the first half of May. That canola is not progressing as quickly. It's going to take longer to hit that 4-leaf stage where it can tolerate flea beetle feeding. So it seems that even by something as simple as seeding slightly later in May, the flea beetles have already found their quote-unquote all-you-can-eat buffet, and they have no need to migrate to different fields. So those later seeded fields may be less likely to require insecticide application. One stark example from this past season was 2 canola fields separated only by a dirt road, seeded on the same day with the same seed, same equipment, same treatment, and the field that was full of Volunteer canola required insecticide application almost immediately, while the field separated only by a road didn't need anything at all. All this just to say that sometimes Volunteer canola needs a bit of special attention. It can have a bit of a broader impact than a lot of other common early season weeds. We could talk about this stuff all day, but we've got to keep these videos short. If you've got any burning questions or any weeds, topics you'd like to see covered in this series, leave a message on any platform this is posted on and we'll get back to you. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.